to ensure we send a Republican to Washington, D.C. to help Trump keep America great. And finally, I'd like to thank our moderator, Len Iaquinta. Len is an interview host on our local public radio affiliate, WGTD's Community Matters program. Len is a native Kenoshan and has been back in town for 18 years. He has earned 2 degrees in journalism, a bachelor's from Medill School of Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, and a master's from the Pulitzer School of Columbia University in the city of New York. Thank you, Len, for taking time out of your busy schedule to help facilitate representative government tonight. Take it away, Len.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure working with you in the committee. And thanks to the candidates for being here and participating in our democratic process, and to all of you in the audience who we depend upon to vote on August 14th in the primary. I'm going to briefly review the rules. The candidates know what the rules are, but so the audience knows what's going on. Questions were submitted in advance and prepared by me. They were grouped by topic to the extent possible, and I might ask other questions. I may ask the candidates to ask questions of each other directly. I may ask candidates for follow-up. I may ask candidates to clarify so that we understand. If I can't understand, I'll ask for clarification. We're going to restrict our questions to the scope of the office that the candidates are seeking. We've asked the candidates to remain on time with their responses and on topic, and we'll be watching for that. We have a timekeeper, and I don't think we'll have to penalize people in taking away seconds. I'm sure that everyone will extend the courtesy that is expected to all. We're asking the audience to keep silent. When we first introduce at the first speeches, I hope you will applaud each candidate. And when they make their closing statements, I hope you will applaud each candidate. But in between, let's not, so we have enough time to squeeze in the maximum amount of questions that we can. Ad hominem attacks won't be tolerated, and I'll interrupt and stop them. We're going to have a opening statement from each candidate. They've been drawn in order by random. They're 1, 2, 3 across the stage. The representatives participated in a drawing earlier. You missed it. It was very exciting. They're going to make opening statements of, 2.5 minutes? 1.5 minutes. And we're going to have rebuttals of up to 1 minute. And responses, will be up to 1 minute, and rebuttals maybe 30 seconds if warranted. So if a candidate wants to make an additional response, just signal to me, and you have another 30 seconds to follow up. Any questions? We're off and running. And our first opening statement will be delivered by candidate Kevin Adam Steen.
Well, thank you very much for coming today. I appreciate you all spending the time to come out and meet each of the candidates that are running for the 1st Congressional District in the 116th Congress. My name is Kevin Adam Steen. I've got a University of Wisconsin-Madison educated mind, a farmer's backbone, a Christian heart, and a family man's wallet. I believe that the Constitution was written to govern a moral people, and I believe that each citizen legislator should stand in front of you, willing and ready to answer any questions that you see fit. Thank you for coming.
Candidate Brian Stile.
Good evening. It's a lot of familiar faces. For those I don't know, my name is Brian Stile, born and raised in Janesville, Wisconsin, and have lived there effectively my whole life. For the last 9 years, I've worked in manufacturing. Working in manufacturing, every day you go in and you solve problems. You bring product in the door, you manufacture it, and you get it out of the door. You got to do it on time. You got to do it under budget. You got to do it every time or you're fired. And to me, that's the kind of process-driven results that we need to see getting done in Washington. 2.5 years ago, Governor Walker appointed me to the University of Wisconsin Board of Regents, and I was approved unanimously in the state Senate by every Republican in our state Senate. It's a responsibility I take seriously. And if you take the university board and you say, what's the one thing you did? We've held the line on tuition. In Washington, when they hold the line on spending, they increase 4, 5, 6%. In Wisconsin, when you hold the line on spending, that's dollar for dollar holding the line on spending. To me, that's the kind of fiscal restraint that we need to bring to Washington. Why am I running? I think Washington needs problem solvers. People have an open, honest conversation and address problems head on. I'm looking for your vote. I'm excited for tonight to have a conversation about the issues and look forward to this conversation. Thank you.
And candidate Nick Pulse.
Good evening, everybody.
There we go.
My name is Nick Pulse.
My name is Nick Pulse. When you go to vote, it's police without the I. Now, when I'm in Kenosha, it's Nick Pulce. Right? And there are those Italian votes. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. Really appreciate you spending the time with us. My short background. I spent 11 and a half years in the Army. I was the U.S. Army Green Beret. During that time, multiple deployments overseas to a lot of those areas that are hot and dry and no one goes to vacation. In those trips and working in that role, got to work with some of the finest men and women that America has to offer. We also got to learn how it is that the federal government functions.
It's on.
I can't use a microphone. I was at 18 Echo. That's a Special Forces Communications Sergeant. I would be letting my ODA down right now if you believe that. So I spent a lot of that time in the military. I transitioned out in 2014, moved into the small business realm. I ran a small business with 3 other partners: physical cybersecurity, access control, and risk mitigation. My little boy came along at the end of 2016 and changed my wife and I's lives. He's the reason that we decided to run. I say we because this is not possible without Carla. She's at home taking care of him, raising a family, so that I can get out and do this and spread the message and meet everybody. And if you can tell from the accent, I didn't grow up in Wisconsin. We chose to move here. We chose to move here because this is a great place to live, a great place to raise our son. We also love what the state did. And to come here and run for office. Thank you, and we'll get into this later.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so this is good. All right, now when we make the closing statements, we're going to go in the reverse order. So we'll go from right to left in the closing statements, and in between, we're going to alternate, and Aaron is going to help keep me on track as to who's up next. But we'll start with the first response with Mr. Steen. And our first question is, none of you have held any elected office before. What work and life experiences have you had that prepare you to represent the residents of the 1st Congressional District? Mr. Steen. Look out for those buttons. Is it dead? Do we need a new mic or a battery, or maybe we could just share a mic that is working?
There we go.
Okay. Thank
You
you.
want to start over? You want to? Okay.
All right.
I didn't know if I burned up all my time playing
no.
with the microphone. The question was, none of us have been in office before, and I think that's extremely important to note our background and our abilities as we present ourselves to you as a representative. I grew up on a farm. I've been a service manager at a local John Deere dealership. I'm currently an engineer at Putzmeister in Sturtevant. And I believe what prepares me for this office is the ability to understand what people are going through on a daily basis. And that, to me, sets me apart from the opponents that I have in this race. When you live and work in this district, it's extremely important that you're able to understand what people are going through and able to explain to others the differences that you have and be able to accurately articulate those issues. And I believe that my background growing up on a farm and being at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, which is 60 square miles surrounded by reality for 4 years, enables me to communicate well with people that we don't always get along with.
Thank you. Mr. Stiles.
You're right. I haven't run for anything since the 6th grade. I won, so I'm 1 for 1. 15 years ago, I cut my teeth coming out of college with a business degree, working for Paul Ryan, covered budget, economic issues, worked there for 1 year. For the last 9 years, I've worked in manufacturing, my home community of Janesville. I worked for Regal Beloit for 8 years. Now I work at Charter NEX, a plastics manufacturing company. I also serve on the University of Wisconsin Board of Regents, appointed by Governor Walker. It's a budget of over $6 billion, 180,000 students. The combination of my background of public service, manufacturing background, and a lifelong resident here of the state of Wisconsin, hometown of Janesville, I think prepares me well to understand the issues that come before us and to use my background and my experience if given the opportunity to represent the voters here of Southeast Wisconsin. Thank you.
All right, let's try this again. When you're running for office, what you're doing is you're leading. You're putting the interests of those that you're representing ahead of your own. So how is it that leadership and my life experiences are going to drive me to Washington to be the best representative of this district? I ran a small business for 4 years. In that time, we're on the most local level. Not here. Again, I'm newer to the state, so we'll put that out right now. But in that running that small business, you feel and you understand the decisions our elected officials are making, whether it's regulations or whether it's laws. And what you learn is they don't have any idea how those rules and regulations affect us at the most local level. The same goes for a time in the military. Multiple trips overseas, working in those environments. Again, you're learning how the federal government functions monetarily and foreign policy. And what you're learning is those officials that are supposed to be in charge, they have no idea how their decisions affect us at the most local level, the tactical level, the on the ground, getting the job done military level. Thank you.
No applause, please. We want to keep this moving. I'm going to do a 30-second lightning round. Todd from Kenosha, related to what you've just talked about, asks, how would you work with other members of Congress to get your job done? Let's go start with Brian.
30 seconds?
Yeah.
I think there's a real Wisconsin-style approach to getting things done. I think it's an open, honest conversation. You identify the problems, and you work together to reach resolution and results. That's the kind of work you do in the private sector every day. You find problems, you pull a team together with diverse views, backgrounds, and understandings. There's already 15. You bring together a group of diverse skill sets, backgrounds. You address the problem head-on, open, honestly. It's a Wisconsin-style approach. I think you can bring that to Washington, and we can get a lot more done.
Thank you. Nick.
So we have a Constitution, and it outlines the role that the federal government, specifically Congress, is supposed to play in our lives. So when we're working with other individuals in Washington, that's the guiding light. If it's in the Constitution, if it's in the best interest of the individual American citizens here in the 1st District, as well as Americans across the country, then we're going to work together. If there's stuff that's outside of the Constitution, or there's legislation that's getting pushed that's not in the best interest of individual Americans, then we're going to do what our job is, which is to push back against it. So working together, the focus is on putting American interests first.
Mr. Steen.
I believe that there's a couple key components that you have to look at when you're talking about working with other people. And to me, if you don't realize that there's a problem, you're not going to find a solution. And I believe that's what's wrong with our politics today. We've talked a lot about hope in the past few years, but we've lost faith. Faith in our government, faith in our politics, and faith in our Lord. And I think it's important that if we work with other people in Congress, we have to see that there's a problem and be willing to accept that there's a problem in order to solve the future problems of our country. And I am more than willing to work with anyone that understands that there are problems in our country that need solved.
Thank you. Moving on, we'd like you to evaluate each other. What do you think are the strengths and weaknesses of your Republican opponents in the primary? What sets you apart from them? Mr. Polsey.
Do you want me to evaluate the other two guys?
Strengths and weaknesses.
Okay, so strengths I see from both individuals is that their heart's in the right place. They want to run, represent the individuals here for the right reasons. Now, some of the drawbacks, we have Adam, good dude, and as far as communication styles go, they're a little bit different, a little bit more casual, a little bit more formal. And then Brian talks a lot about the Wisconsin delivery and the Wisconsin style of communicating. I would just ask on that as far as the weakness relating to the background. as far as being a lawyer versus in manufacturing. So maybe the communication a little less clear as far as some of the weaknesses I see with the other two guys.
Thank you. Mr. Steen.
Well, I think it's extremely clear the differences between the three of us. Nick Pulse, nice fella, moved here from Texas or New England, one or the other. And
They look alike.
Brian Stile, born and raised in Janesville. But at the same time, I've been in manufacturing since college. I'm a welder. I've been a welder on the assembly line. And if you've truly been a manufacturer in this world, you understand those processes like 5S, Six Sigma, and the day-to-day operations of a manufacturing plant. So I really believe that the pros and cons are very, very clear between the candidates. And if you're willing to take a time to look at those pros and cons, you will see the clear differences.
Thank you. Mr. Stile.
I think both of the gentlemen I share the stage with are well-intentioned and care a lot about the country that we live in and about the conservative movement. I think what separates me is born and raised in Wisconsin, lived here effectively my entire life, and have worked hard in the conservative movement. For the last 10 years, I've been boots on the ground in my home community of Janesville and across southeast Wisconsin. If you come to a conservative event, you come to a Lincoln Day dinner, you come to a picnic, I'm the face you're going to see at that Rock County event in my home community. I'm probably there handing out your name tag, checking you in, and pushing and working in that conservative movement over the last 10 years. If you think where we were 10 years ago, and you think where we were today, and you think about the efforts that we put in to drive conservative reforms here in Wisconsin, I'm proud of the work I've done. I'm the only one on the ballot, Democrat or Republican alike, that voted for Governor Walker in the recall election. I've worked hard to get conservatives elected because I believe in the conservative movement, and I believe I can continue to push that conservative movement if given the opportunity in Washington.
Thank you. Next question is regarding term limits. Do you believe in term limits? If so, what limits do you support for the House and for the Senate? And would you pledge to limit your own term if elected? And if so, what would be your limit? I think we're back to Mr. Steen. Thank you.
Well, I've said this many times before that if you don't practice what you preach, you can talk all day, but your actions speak louder than your words. I believe that the Constitution was written to govern a moral people and that we need citizen legislatures to step up and serve in Congress and in the State House so that we can have representatives that understand the problems that we see here in the private sector. I believe after 5 to 10 years, you have lost your effectiveness in the House or the Senate. And I think it's important that term limits, unfortunately, now be enforced because people cannot be in Washington and in their state at the same time. And you lose touch with the people that you're representing as a leader. You are simply here. I'm offering my services to you as a representative. And I think it's important that the representative understand the people and the processes that they're going through on a daily basis. And if you're in Washington for 20 or 30 years, you have completely lost touch with this group of people we're talking to today.
Mr. Stile.
I think the most dangerous aspect of our federal government is unelected bureaucrats in Washington. To me, that's the fourth branch of government. They're unaccountable, they're unelected. I think the people that need to be accountable and elected are people running for Congress. I think every 2 years we have strong elections that determine whether or not the representative that you've chosen is doing a good job or a bad job. These debates, the debates that are going to continue in the general election, are going to prove that, and it gives the opportunity for individuals to go to Washington and to drive forth a conservative agenda and put a check on unelected bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. I think we need to get a hold of our federal government spending, and I won't stay there a day longer than necessary to get that done. Thank you.
Mr. Pulse?
So with term limits, 6 years. 6 years in the House. If you run for Senate, 6 years in the Senate. And then get out. And the problem is that you spend way too much time in Washington, it starts to change you. You know, we hear a lot of talk about the bureaucracy, the deep state, all the other names we have for it. The reason why that exists and the reason why it continues to grow is because we have elected officials in Congress that continue to fund it. They continue to fund it because they're continuing to try and get reelected. Call it the Incumbent Protection Act. Every couple of years, they throw a lot of money at the federal government and spend. And the way to solve that is to get constitutional amendment that term limits the House and term limits the Senate. We've tried everything else, and it's not working. What we've had now is we have massive amount of debt, runaway spending, we got healthcare costs that are skyrocketing, immigration that's not working for the American citizen, trade agreements that aren't in our best interest, and we have a Social Security funding crisis. So we can trace all of that back to individuals that go to Washington to spend a career. 6 years.
Thank you. I'm going to have to hold your feet to the fire, gentlemen. I didn't hear an answer of how many years you would stay in office. Mr. Steen?
Yes, sir. 5 to 10 years. So I believe, having not spent time in that office, my exact number would be 3 terms as a congressman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Stiles?
Not a day longer than it takes to get this federal government and federal budget under control.
What if that's forever?
I won't be there forever, I promise you that. I'm home in Janesville, lived there my whole life, and I'm looking forward to coming back and working again in the private sector.
All right, I'll accept that. We're not going to get any further from you on that one.
Can't we ask him to answer the question?
I'm going to switch to personal integrity, maybe a related theme. Personal integrity is something that voters look for when electing a representative. There have been some issues brought up in this primary that we would like to give each of the candidates an opportunity to address. Where do you want me to go? I'm sorry. There we go. Mr. Stowe, when you first announced you were running for Congress, you called yourself a manufacturer, and I think that's still up on your website as I read it this afternoon. After blowback from both constituents and opponents, you changed your ads to say you work in manufacturing. Now, I understand that you are a corporate lawyer. If you're not, please correct me. Please explain this.
So I think I've made it pretty clear since the beginning. So I've worked in manufacturing for the last 9 years. I've shown up to work at the same facility alongside everybody else in that company. And you park and you walk in. Everybody has a different role. So I've never said I'm on the production floor. That's very clear. I have a business degree in undergrad. That's a focus in accounting and finance. I also have a law degree. I'm proud of my educational background. But what do I do every day? I work in a manufacturing setting, not in the context of a law firm attorney. I think that needs to be clear. I think that's maybe where your question goes with that. But every day you're working on the team. You're out on the shop floor. You're out solving problems. You're working. The educational background, I think, is a great benefit. I think it's good to have a business background. I'm proud of the law degree that I have. And so I've worked in a manufacturing setting. That's who pays my bills. That's my W-2 is Regal Beloit Corporation and now Charter NEX. I think that's been pretty clear and pretty straightforward for the duration of the campaign. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pulse, you've been described by some as a carpetbagger, a rather old-fashioned term, being from out of the area and not really one of us, supposedly. Why do you think you're qualified to represent the voters of the 1st Congressional District, since you're not from Wisconsin and we understand that you moved here less than a year ago?
Now, someone that's been in the military, you move around the country. You're stationed at a lot of different locations. And so it came with me up here. Now, why am I qualified to run for office? Life experiences drive me. My little boy's birth. I can't control where I was. The problem I saw, thank you, sir. The problem I saw in running a small business, actually an owner of a business, responsible for payroll, and as someone deployed multiple times, what I saw with those life experiences is our elected officials do not have our best interests in their hearts when they're taking action. They are not leading. We've already ticked off why. Spending, health insurance, immigration, et cetera. So if we're going to make a difference, we have to defeat leadership.
Thank you. Mr. Steen, you issued 2 separate press releases regarding one of your opponents. One press release referred to Mr. Stiles' work history, and another one was an allegation regarding Mr. Stiles violating one of your senior campaign advisors' property rights. Please explain the details of these releases and why you issued them.
Sure, no problem. So originally, Mr. Stiles had some information up on his website, and there were some differences in his employment history. We put out a press release and were promptly asked by the Stiles campaign to take down the press release. The questions are simply an order of job employment. To me, if you have nothing to hide, you don't wipe your LinkedIn account. You go to my LinkedIn account, it's been the same for the last 10 years. And that's extremely important to me when you're going to represent people in Congress. They need to know who you are. You mentioned something about property rights. If you'll notice, there's a Facebook commercial that I put up about 16,000 views. And that commercial was filmed on friends of ours' property where I was able to get a signature and be allowed to make that video. Prior to that, Mr. Stiles' campaign decided to release a commercial that he aired nationally that there was no permission granted in order to fly that drone over the property.
Do you have a rebuttal?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. So maybe we can walk through my employment history because I think there seems to be confusion. If you go on the Board of Regents website, and this is the press release that's referenced, there's a misread, I think, by your campaign on the dates that I've been appointed in the term of the Board of Regents. So the term of the Board of Regents is 2016. It's a 7-year term, so it would terminate then in 2023. And so the dates on the Board of Regents then would carry across. You can look at the dates there. Then my personal work history, which is actually the paid job where I get my W-2. So in 2009, I started working at Regal Beloit Corporation, worked there through last year, and then joined Charter NEX. And I've been at Charter NEX ever since. I think it's a pretty straightforward process in my career history. I'm not sure where the confusion is, but happy to clarify, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. All right. I think we're ready to go on to another very interesting question. This is a test. It's a very special test. Conservatives make up a majority of the Republican Party. On a scale of 1 to 10, how conservative are you? With 1 being very liberal, 5 being moderate, and 10 being very conservative. So where are you on the conservative scale? And how about rating your opponents, too? So we'll see if there's any convergence here. It should be interesting. Let's start with Mr. Pulsey.
All right, so if I...
10 is conservative.
Say it again?
Very conservative. This is a conservative scale, okay? 1 is the least conservative. 10 is the most conservative, just beyond conservative.
Okay. You go any farther on the conservative scale, you fall off the
Right,
earth.
that's it. We need the microphones because some of us are plugged into the speakers here.
I shouldn't have evaluated him earlier. We should have waited to debate. If I was going to rate myself, I'd say probably around a 9 as far as conservatives go. I believe in small government, pro-life, pro-Second Amendment. I believe that our Constitution, we've moved so far away from it. And because of that, we're running into a lot of problems. And so a lot of the power needs to be at the state and the local level. Back here in the 1st District, the state of Wisconsin, and then across the country. Because fundamentally, there's not enough smart people in D.C. that can tell us how to rule our lives. And that's what we're running into right now. Because we have too many people that believe it's their right to rule, and they go to Washington, and they start dictating how it is that we should be living here in Wisconsin, California, all across the country. Now, if I was going to rate some of the guys, I think based off of wording and action throughout the campaign, I think Brian would be a 7 or 6. Adam would probably be somewhere around 8 or 9 as well, based off of what they've said publicly, based off of the things that they've put out, and then listen to them and being back and forth with them at the 3 previous candidate question and answer forms.
Okay, we'll be running statistics on this, Mr. Steen.
Well, I appreciate the question because I believe that I've been asked that multiple times. What is a conservative? My speech is I'm a Christian conservative Republican, and in that order, that defines who I am. And I believe that's extremely important that you know each of these candidates personally so you'll understand how they vote. Myself, I think Nick nailed it on the head. It'd be an 8 or a 9. I believe that life begins at conception, and there are no exceptions. I believe Planned Parenthood doesn't deserve a dime as it exists today. And to me, that's important because that defines the values and morals that I have. I think it's also important that you look at the other candidates. Boy, Nick, you had it pretty good. I really think you did. I would rate Brian in that 6 to 7 range based on experience and background. And I do believe Nick is right around that 7 or 8 category.
Thank you, Mr. Stiles.
I'll give myself a 10. I'll give the gentleman on the stage a 10. When you put the scale and you have Bernie Sanders, who was campaigning for the Democratic opponent in Janesville, Wisconsin 2 weeks ago, and Nancy Pelosi in Milwaukee about a week ago, and you look at that scale, I don't know how anybody here on the stage isn't a 10. But I'll tell you, what I look at that conservative movement, I think it's about giving power back to the individual, to our community, that's where the resolutions and that's where the problems need to be solved. not in a large government. So to me, a conservative, it's small government. It's giving power back to the individual, our community, that is where problems are best to be solved. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have another scale here. We're going to keep on the grading scale. On a scale of 1 to 10, I think 1 being not so hot and 10 being absolutely wonderful, would you please rate your support of President Trump's policies and actions as the President of the United States so far, and please explain. And we're now going to go back to Mr. Steen.
So we just have to rate ourselves this time, right? Wonderful.
Maybe.
Well, I believe the President of the United States is the leader of the Republican Party. Once he won the primary in 2016, he is now the leader of the Republican Party, and I think that's extremely important, and I think that the men on this stage differ on this opinion. Their words might say something, but the people that are supporting them are very much in the past. So Paul Ryan has chosen to support a candidate in this race, and I think that's important to know that Paul Ryan is retiring. Ryan Priebus is also supporting a candidate in this race, and he has also been fired from his position. So I think you need to look at the President of the United States, and I would rate myself a 10 and follow the President, and the values that I hold and the positions that I have in spending, immigration, and tariffs support the President, and the President will sign the bills that I am able to place in front of him. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stile.
I'll give it a 10 again. I mean, I support the president. I look at the conservative reforms that we're starting to get enacted in Washington. What we need to do is people stop bickering and start solving problems. I look at the tax reform as a perfect example of what happens when conservatives come together and address a problem head on. What we're seeing currently economically is directly tied to those tax reforms that we got done in Washington. And so I support the president's conservative reforms. I think what we need to do in Washington is stop working against people, start addressing problems, working head on, and getting results done for the conservative movement for people here in Wisconsin. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go with an 11. The president needs help, right? He's doing the best he can at the executive branch level. He's running into problems in Congress. And I think based off his actions, what he ran on, is that he's got the best interests of American people in our hearts first. So what do? Well, you can disagree with the president. We're, as elected officials in the House, we're going to have a different role than the Senate and then the executive branch. However, at the end of the day, we should have so much more done right now with a Republican-controlled president, a Republican-controlled Senate, and a Republican-controlled Congress. There's so many things that we put him and the rest of those individuals in power to do, and they're not doing it. They're fighting him tooth and nail. That's a problem. The number two question I get at all the doors that we've hit over the last several months is, do you support the president? The first thing is, how do we drop healthcare costs? And the second question I get all the time is, do you support the president? And the answer is yes. We'll have his back when we go to Congress.
Thank you. Marty of Twin Lakes asks, 18 Republican and 18 Democratic members of the Congressional Problem Solvers Caucus last week released their Break the Gridlock proposal to reform House rules so that bipartisan proposals to solve the country's problems get debate and a vote. What are your thoughts on the gridlock proposal, and would you vote for a speaker that promises to implement Break the Gridlock? Would you join the Problem Solvers Caucus, joining Mike Gallagher, the Republican of Green Bay? Mr. Stile.
I'm not an expert on the specific proposal, but I can walk you through the philosophy behind it, right? We need to have more open, honest debate on the floor of the House. I think that's an opportunity for problems to be addressed properly, to have conversations about what is the problem and how do we want to solve it. I think that'll ultimately lead to more work getting done. I think what we've seen for a long time is individuals in Washington who put themselves first rather than solving problems. I think we need a Wisconsin-style approach to doing that. I could look into the specifics of the bill, but I have all my belief that the more we have conversation, the more we address problems head on, the more we put votes on the floor, the better off we're going to be. You're going to know where your representatives stand, and it's an opportunity to solve problems and get things done in Washington.
Thank you. Mr. Pols.
I talked to Marty briefly before the debate, I think it was or the question and answer forum we have, and I got a chance to look at his proposal. So a couple things. I like the effort. I like what they're trying to do by changing some of the rules, because the big problem in Congress is that everything comes through leadership. comes through the Speaker's office, which backs up to my initial decision to run. We have a problem in leadership. So we can attack it head on. We can run against leadership and defeat them so we can put people in power that are going to work for us. But backing up to that actual proposal, a couple things. First thing they want to do is they want to change some of the rules to allow amendments to bills, to allow a longer process for the bills so that individual House members have more time. That's a great thing. The one thing I don't like about that bill, I looked at all the individuals that signed on to it. About 75% of those individuals that signed on to that caucus voted for the omnibus bill. They had a chance. They had a chance to work for Americans and veto that omnibus bill. And when push came to shove, they did not. So that worries me.
Thank you. Mr. Steve.
I did get a chance also to look at the proposal, and I think it's important that we realize that right now we have a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and a Republican President. If we want to divide ourselves by caucus, our goals are not going to align every single time. I think we need to look for leadership, which is our President of the United States, and we need to support him. I believe that we do need to change the rules in Congress and in the House so that we can get things done. But I think if you don't send the right people to Washington who are looking out for your values and your goals, then you're never going to be able to affect change. And I think that's critical in this race, that you look for someone who represents you and your values and not their own when they go to Congress. Thank you.
If Republicans retain control of the House, Ohio Representative Jim Jordan, a founder of the House Freedom Caucus, announced he plans to run for Speaker, challenging California Representative Kevin McCarthy. Do you support Jordan or McCarthy for Speaker, and why? Mr. Polson.
Absolutely support Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan and the Freedom Caucus are the only individuals in Congress that are pushing back against the overreach of the federal government. They're fighting the massive spending. They're fighting the government intervention and overreach into the health insurance market. They're fighting to secure the borders and get rid of that lobby in Washington that wants to allow cheap labor and wants to allow illegal immigration to continue. They're fighting against the trade agreements like NAFTA that aren't free trade, they're managed trade. And in managed trade, you pick winners and losers. They're fighting against that. They recognize what the problem is. And the problem is individuals that go to Washington and spend a career. So if Jim Jordan gets elected, you put me in Congress, I will vote for Jim Jordan. I will support him because I believe based off his actions and his words is that he has the best interests of Americans. He carries conservative values, but more importantly, he carries conservative constitutional values. He understands that document. He understands the role that it's supposed to play in our lives, and he understands why it is that we've moved so far away from it, and we have to return back to it.
Thank you. Steve.
I'd like to do a little comparison to our current speaker, Paul Ryan, and I'd like to rate him from A to Z, if you will. So I give Paul Ryan an A as a representative of this district. He has did a great job representing people in our district. I gave him a B because he was always a solid vote for the state of Wisconsin. He was elected 10 times in a swing district. But as a speaker, I have to respectfully give him a C because as our speaker, he's had 20 years of experience. We have a Republican House, Republican Senate, and a Republican Congress. And I think it's important that through those years, he's had the opportunity to do 5 times what he's done for this district. And finally, as a local representative, I believe he dropped the ball when it came to Janesville and the GM plant. I believe that it wasn't here in Kenosha when we talked about the casino or the Chrysler plant. So when you compare Mr. Jordan to our current president, or our current speaker, I think you need to consider that he will provide an insight that we haven't seen. And I think that's a good thing, and I would support Mr. Jordan. Thank you.
Mr. Stein.
I think the question puts the cart way before the horse. And so I look at this race, and it's going to determine who the next speaker is. At the end of this year, Paul Ryan's going to hand the speaker's gavel to somebody new. It's going to be a Republican, or it's going to be Nancy Pelosi. And so I think we need to stay focused on keeping this seat red, winning this seat, and making sure that we have a Republican who supports the president as Speaker of the House. The question as to who and who's running, to me, that's a question for the future. I think the question for today is how do we hold this seat so that we don't end up with a Democrat representing us and Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House? Thank you.
Thank you.
We get a rebuttal?
Did I miss you?
Do we get a rebuttal?
Oh, go ahead.
I just want to, you're going to probably vote for McCarthy because he's donated to your campaign. So, I mean, we can get that out there. He's donated, he's put money in your campaign, so you're not going to vote against him. Basically, he's trying to buy your vote, is what I would lay that as.
I mean, I'm surprised. I'm excited of everybody that's come on and built up the team that I have. 85% of my donations are from in-state. I'd note that the majority of your donors are from out of state. I note the majority of your money is from out of state. I'm proud of building up a Wisconsin coalition, a local coalition of individuals to be able to defend this seat so that we ultimately have the choice as to who's the next Speaker of the House.
I would like a rebuttal as well, if that's all right. Brian Style, you talk about your style in Washington. Right now, your treasurer is a Washington insider. Your campaign manager is a lobbyist. And if you're going to bring Wisconsin style to Washington, you've already brought Washington here. I believe we're...
Can we have some quiet, please? I want quiet and respect for the speakers here. Is that understood?
I'll finish my 15 seconds. I plan to select 6 people from this district, and I plan to bring 1 person from each county to Washington with me so that we can actually represent Wisconsin in Washington. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I will allow 1 further round of rebuttals on this topic, if anyone wants to proceed. Otherwise, we'll go to the next question. And I'm serious about quiet. Trump recently stated that he will shut down the government if Democrats don't fund a U.S.-Mexico wall. Do you support a wall being built along the U.S.-Mexico border? And please answer just regarding the wall. We're going to get to other immigration issues later. And we're now going to Mr. Steen. Thank you.
I really appreciate the question because our president ran on a campaign that was extremely important. It's something that we haven't seen in the past 20 years. He actually is doing what he's saying, and I think that's encouraging. So the question is, would I support the wall? Robert Frost, apologize, I should focus better. I've got a 4-year-old. But Robert Frost said, good fences make good neighbors. Not having a southern border in our country is like asking each and every one of you to keep a front door on your house, but remove the lock. It's unnecessary. And I think that's a foolish thing to say. So I would support building the wall. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Style.
Yeah, I think we got to secure the border, and the wall is a key component of that. I think there's multiple reasons. So immigration, we're going to come back to it. So I'll also note that recently I was with law enforcement community here in Kenosha, and we talk about the heroin drug trade and where a lot of those drugs are traversing into our communities and the impact they're having. There's multiple reasons why you need to secure the border, and the wall is a key component of that.
Thank you. Mr. Polsey.
Yes, I support the border wall being built, and it's part of a larger immigration strategy to defend our borders. Okay, so how do we get that done? We can talk about it all day. The president ran on it, and I would argue that that was his signature issue of building the wall. I think that's what drove a lot of people out because we've had 30 years of talk about wall building and border security, and it hasn't happened. It's just been this continued inflow. We've had multiple amnesties. So now we're at a position where we have a president that's willing to fight for that wall, and he needs help. He needs help in Congress. All funding starts in Congress. So that's where we need to begin with. And so we can hear the rhetoric back and forth about shutting down the government and talking about building the wall. We need to identify the initial problem. All funding comes out of the House, and they're fighting him. They're fighting. His own party's fighting against him in the House as far as funding. Just recently, they said, hey, we're not going to put funding for that wall. Why? Why are they fighting against them? That is an absolute problem that we have to address. And so we have to start with Congress to get that wall built.
Thank you. On the related topic, what are your concerns regarding what is variously called chain migration or family unification, whatever you want to call it? What are your concerns and thoughts about that topic? Mr. Style.
So I look at our whole immigration policy, it's a complete disaster. If you tried to design it this terribly, I don't think you could. It's Republicans and Democrats alike have failed us. And so what we need is a comprehensive immigration reform. And what I would prioritize in that reform is identifying our workforce needs and tying immigration to our workforce needs. There's a manufacturing facility in Janesville that would hire 300 welders if they could. And so if we tied our immigration policy such that employer could team up with an individual to match that job, would be in a much better position. That individual could have a welding skill. He could come from Italy, from Mexico, from wherever. You tie that individual up to the workforce needs of our community, and it's a win-win situation. And to me, that's the focus of how we should be looking at comprehensive immigration reform.
Thank you. Mr. Polson.
The question was on chain migration. Okay, so chain migration, family migration, whichever one you want to call it, what does it do? What is it? Individual comes here, he gets a green card, gets a visa, as a legal resident or a citizen, then he can sponsor multiple family members, right? Father, son, daughter, husband, uncle, great uncle, cousin, and pretty soon you have 20, 30, 40 people off that one initial visa, that one initial legal green card here in the United States. So what's the problem with that? The problem with that is, how do we assimilate, how do we bring those individuals in here and get them into a part of the United States, a part of America, assimilate into the economy and the public school system, et cetera? That problem, though, going back to 1965 is when that originally changed. We used to have a merit-based system. 1965 immigration law changed that to what we have right now, which is family migration. So there's a lot of things on the immigration side that Congress needs to take action on, and one of them is reining in that family migration right now. And the way to do that is to limit that, to go to father, son, husband, daughter, instead of allowing multiple extended family.
Thank you.
I appreciate that, Nick. That's a very good description of chain migration. We've been kicking the can down the road and waving our hands and screaming and saying, we need comprehensive immigration for the last 20 years. Paul Ryan, as Speaker of the House, has been in Congress for 20 years and seen the progression that we've failed our country in our immigration policies. And I think that's important that we focus on a solution. So we know what chain migration is. If we simply punish employers for hiring citizens that are here illegally, we will change the perspective of our immigration system. We have a legal immigration system. That's how many of your grandparents, my grandparents, came to this country. We allow people to come here based on the jobs that we have, and if they're not required to be here and they're not a productive member of society, we require their country to pay for the extradition back to their home country. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a question, rebuttal?
Certainly.
Are you saying that you want business to enforce immigration? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'd love to answer. I would like the businesses to be punished if they are hiring illegal immigrants, which causes them an incentive to sponsor immigration or legal immigrants into this country.
All right, so I disagree with that, because you now add an extra layer of regulatory, an extra layer of burdensome paperwork on business owners that are already over-regulated and they have no time. They have no time, and then you add another layer acting like a law enforcement agency. We shouldn't be doing that to our businesses.
Okay. Mr. Stile, do you have a response to that? No. All right. Well, then we're going to move on to the dreamers. What should be done with the children and the young that are known as dreamers? And if you'd like to put a note in there about how you feel about the sanctuary city issue, we'd be interested in hearing that too. And we're up to Mr. Polsing.
All right, we'll start with sanctuary cities. I don't support it. We shouldn't be having sanctuary cities, and the way to attack it is with federal funding. Walks me back in time again to that multiple comments on omnibus bill. That's what happens. You put all these bills together, things get lumped in, and then we'll have another round of sanctuary cities because we're funding them. So the way to attack that problem is to stop using omnibus bills, have individual appropriation bills come for an up or down vote, and then we'll try it. Then we will not have those challenges with sanctuary cities. On the dreamers and DACA. DACA is an unconstitutional act put by President Obama under his administration. I think right now DACA and dreamers is a distraction. I don't support doing anything on DACA and dreamers right now because it takes the eye off of the problem, which is securing our borders first, which is getting those immigration laws fixed and in place. We talked about family migration. We're talking about getting rid of the asylum, the catch and release, or modifying the asylum problems. And then once we have our borders secure, then we take action on individuals that have come here illegally. Because if we don't, we're never going to solve that number one problem, which is border security. And don't forget, we've had 7 amnesties since 1986 without border security.
Thank you. Mr. Steen.
I really appreciate the question because many people came to this country legally through our legal immigration system that exists today. Just because you are here illegally doesn't mean that you are not a productive member of our society. I think that if we choose to treat these people as human beings, allow them a legal process, which exists today, it's called legal immigration, and allow them to enter into that program, then we can bring them into society and encourage growth and encourage indoctrination into the U.S. because people want to come to this country. In case you're curious, we're not building a wall to keep people in. The wall is required to keep people that don't become productive members of society out of this country. So I think it's important that we treat people, citizens, whether old or young, as people and let them become citizens of this country. But we have to encourage that instead of turning a blind eye and waving our hands and saying, we need to change the entire system. Thank you.
I think the question identifies the fact that we have a completely broken immigration system. And so we need to reform our entire immigration system. And before you do that, you need to secure the border. And so you need to enforce the rule of law. So that's the sanctuary cities piece. You need to enforce the rule of law. We're a nation of laws. We need to secure the border. And then we need a comprehensive immigration reform that addresses this total disaster that we have. And you brought up DACA. It's probably the most deserving of any of the groups that are being addressed with this incredibly broken system. And so what we need to do, we need to have a comprehensive immigration reform, address the groups that you identified. But step one, before you can get there, is you got to secure the border. And then step two is you also have to enforce the rule of law as it is. We're a nation of laws. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I ask for a rebuttal or no?
Sure.
I'd just like to clarify some of the words that we're using up here. In Congress, there's 435 voting members of Congress. And in order to develop a comprehensive immigration system, that means completely restructuring our immigration system as it exists. So if you think we have trouble now passing a bill, try getting all of those members together, and a majority of them together, to completely overhaul our immigration system. That is called legal immigration. Thank you.
Any response to that?
Yeah, but how do you do that? That's the question. How? We've heard these buzzwords, comprehensive immigration, for 30 years. 1986, comprehensive immigration reform. We got 2 million people, amnesty. We got zero border security. We talked about it for 30 years. I said 7 amnesties we've had since 1986. Now we hear that buzzword again, comprehensive immigration. What specifically are you going to do? What actions are you going to take? That's the key. What are you going to do in Congress? How are you going to take action on that? We talked about multiple proposals. We have videos on it. The first step is the border. It starts with that border. DACA and Dreamers is a distraction from ultimately securing the borders.
Thank you.
To address that head on, I mean, you look at where the problem is. We don't have enough conservatives elected in the House and in the Senate. So I have faith that if we are strong in this election, we elect Republicans in the House, we elect Republicans in the Senate, note Tammy Baldwin, I believe that our president can pull people together and get comprehensive immigration reform done. What we need to do is get out and vote and elect conservatives to go to Washington to represent us.
Thank you. Continuing, let's go a little bit deeper into the immigration system with respect to the U.S. visa system for the immigrant workers. What do you think needs to be done, if anything, with respect to that system? And we're up to Mr. Steen.
You say Steen or Style?
Steen.
Thank you. So I've been on the Wisconsin Soybean Board for the past 3 years, representing farmers and educating local, state, and national officials on the needs of our agricultural community. And that work visa program is an extreme problem. I believe that, again, my comments are the same. It's been the same 3 steps since the beginning. You need to have a process in place that encourages employers to sponsor citizens. These are immigrants that are working in this country. We need their labor. They're doing a great service to this country, but we need them to become citizens. So if we can encourage them by a sponsor using their employer because they want the help, and we use that as a draw to cause them to become citizens, then we will be able to remove the complicated visa program that you've got to go back and forth and pay fees, and you get them to become productive members of society and be engaged in this process.
In a comprehensive reform, I think what we need to do is match up our workforce needs with our legal immigration system. And so you see that in a number of areas. You see it in our agricultural community and our dairy community. Those aren't seasonal jobs, those are annual jobs. Our dairy community has struggles finding individuals who want to take those jobs. As we look towards our legal immigration system, we should identify individuals who want to work where we have workforce needs. I mentioned the welders example earlier. There's welding needs all across the 1st Congressional District. This is opportunities where we can take the legal immigration system, tie our workforce needs to individuals that bring those skill sets. It'll strengthen our country, strengthen our economy, and it can be a win-win situation. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, forget about comprehensive. Take that buzzword away. There's two things in particular we can do with visas right now. The first is H-1B. There is loopholes right now in federal government law which allow companies to take advantage of if they have over 15% of workforce in this specific part. What that does is it incentivizes them to offshore and outsource jobs, and you have individual Americans in the tech sector are losing jobs to these outsourcing. The second thing right now, for example, here in the state, the dairy industry. The dairy industry, dairy farmers require year-round work. Right now, on federal law, we don't have anything on the books which will allow a temporary visa-type program for year-round labor. We have it seasonal in the Southwest, but there's nothing on the books right now to fill and to help with that immigration need. So when we're talking about specifically visa and how it relates to federal government policy, the two things that we can take action on and should be taking action on. Why? Because it's putting the interests of American workers first. H-1B, and then we talk about the ag visas.
Thank you. All right. A big topic in the news, and in many states, and we've certainly had issues with this in Wisconsin, is that T word, tariffs. Do you agree with the President's trade policy with respect to tariffs? And please explain. We're up to Mr. Stile.
Sure. So I look at our trade system that we have. We have a real problem. So we have countries that are allies like Canada. We have countries that aren't, like China, that play games and take advantage of United States trade. Canada has a convoluted milk pricing system. Makes it really difficult for Wisconsin dairy farmers to export their dairy goods to Canada. China has a whole rigmarole of things that make it very difficult for American workforce to export products to China and to countries across the globe. And so what the president's doing, you can tell, right? He's on chapter whatever of The Art of the Deal. And so he's bringing these to the table. I'm optimistic that we're going to keep seeing results like we did with the EU, where they're coming back to the table. I believe that tariffs are a tax. I believe they're unstable. And I'm hopeful that we get through this phase immediately, but support the overall goal of lowering tariffs so we have free, fair, reciprocal trade, which if given that opportunity, the workers here in the 1st Congressional District will win every single day of the year.
Thank you.
So what the president recognized and he ran on in 2016 was we have managed trade agreements. We don't have free trade. I brought it up earlier with it related to NAFTA and some of those agreements. So in those managed trade agreements, you have the federal government and these extraterritorial, extra outside sovereign governments picking winners and losers. So the president's taken action on that. He said he was going to do it, and he's doing it. What do tariffs do? They raise the cost, right? They're taxed. Because countries don't pay the taxes. Individual businesses and consumers are the ones that are paying that cost. So what I look at the president and his strategy right now and what he's doing is he's using these tariffs as leverage to renegotiate the larger trade agreements, in particular NAFTA, because what he knows is once those get renegotiated, they will be lined up and prepared for American businesses to take advantage of them, small businesses in particular right now, and that hasn't been happening in the last couple of decades. And so him taking action and using these tariffs right now, I believe is a negotiation tactic for a larger goal, which is a renegotiation of NAFTA and some of the other managed trade agreements that are not in American interest.
And Mr. Steen.
Thank you. When it comes to tariffs, I believe that our country is going to come out of this time and look back and be amazed at how much stronger we have become because of the challenges we are facing. Growing up on a farm, selling beans a month and a half ago at $10.50 on the Chicago Board of Trade. They closed at $8.30 this afternoon at 3:15. I understand the challenges that farmers are going through, and the tariffs are a direct correlation to that price drop. And I think it's extremely important that we realize that the President of the United States understands business. He understands this country, and he is working toward a solution that will solve the problems, and I believe it will drive our economy to be stronger. We export 60% of our soybeans to China. I think this will drive the soy industry and other industries across the country to look internally to this country and make it strong again like it was 30 and 40 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a proposal, if you all agree. We have several very interesting questions I'd like to squeeze in. If we could do 30-second top-of-mind responses to some of these topics, I think the audience, which has been very polite and very attentive, would appreciate it. First, for 30 seconds, and we're going to start with Mr. Polsey. What do you think should be done to fix the VA system, if anything?
30 seconds? Holy cow. Okay. All right. There's
Or maybe nothing.
There's two things that are wrong with the VA system. The first has to do with disability claims, and that backs up into the backlog. And so when you're on active duty, you have that whole ethos of not wanting to go to the doctor, not wanting to go to sick call. So what happens is if you don't get that stuff documented when you're on active duty, it's so hard for you to find it once you get out. So first thing is we have to focus on that, and that's leadership in the military. The second thing relates to care. And the VA is a bureaucracy. There's a massive amount of fat in the VA between the soldiers and the retired soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, and the actual doctors. So we got to strip that fat down.
Thanks, Mr. Steen.
My grandfather served in the 82nd Airborne as a paratroop instructor, and I think it's extremely important that we look at the VA system as we do the rest of us. We all have insurance, we all have health care, and we need access to health care. I believe the VA system is a great system as it exists, and I believe there are flaws, but I think we need to allow our ex-military and current military to be able to access the rest of our healthcare system and not be limited to simply the VA.
You look at the veterans whose care is provided by the VA, it's one of the most important things that we'll be doing in Washington. VA Choice, I think, was a spectacular first move. We have areas where the VA is strong. You look at the VA hospital in Green Bay, seems to be, as I'm speaking with people, they're really satisfied with their due care. I think the step is that there's oversight that's needed, and the oversight role in Washington has been lacking. And so what we need to do is keep a close eye on these agencies so that problems that built up on the VA in particular could have been stopped in their tracks with proper oversight.
All right.
Can I have 15 seconds?
I want to move on.
That's all right, fine. You're in charge.
Healthcare is a really big topic. We could spend another 2 hours talking about all the aspects of healthcare. But if you had one thing you would work on with respect to healthcare in the United States of America, what would that thing be in the next 2 years? Mr. Steen.
I appreciate you saying 2 years. We are applying for a 24-month job to represent you, so you have to be realistic in your goals. I believe in our healthcare system. We cannot rip the federal government out of our healthcare system instantaneously. If you do, well, my great-grandmother lived through the Depression, and I believe we will see that again. I believe we need to have a plan that does remove the federal government so it allows individuals access to their healthcare providers without a third party.
Thank you. Mr. Stile.
I think we need to enhance HSA plans. I believe the more that individuals have choice on their doctors and decisions are made by patients and by the doctors themselves, the more that we're going to be able to lower cost and increase quality. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Polson.
Two things, get rid of the Affordable Care Act. Second thing, change the tax code. Right now, the tax code incentivizes us to get our health insurance from businesses. Because it does, we're disassociated from the actual cost, and we're disassociated from the negotiating prices. So if we change and tweak the tax code and allow individuals the same benefits that small business and big business have, that goes a long way now to increasing freedom and goes a long way now to allowing individuals to decide to purchase their health care across a variety of different platforms. Last thing, let's get rid of and allow individuals to buy across state lines.
All right. One more real flash question. Republican Party is sometimes called the party of life. Let's clarify your beliefs on abortion, please. Mr. Stile first.
Sure. So I come from a large Catholic family. I believe my faith has guided me through. I believe life begins at conception. One of the key roles in Congress is to defend the life of the unborn. I believe, in my pro-life stance, I believe there's exceptions for life of the mother, for rape, and for incest. But I will be fighting to defend the unborn in Congress, and I'm honored to have the endorsement of Wisconsin Right to Life, the largest pro-life organization in the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Polson.
Life begins at conception for me. My little boy was size of a peanut the first time we saw him, and it became real. I was pro-life before that little boy came along, and then when we finally achieved and we finally had that little guy growing and my wife, and he showed up for the first time, that little head came out, that was real at that point. And to hold that little life, it cemented in me the fact that we're holding pro-life 100%.
Thank you. I want to thank again, I'm sorry, Mr. Steen, beg your pardon.
That's all right. I'll be here. I believe that life begins at conception as well, but I believe there are zero exceptions for life. I believe once you determine that you are going to play God, whether you believe in God or not, you can choose when life begins and ends. We go down a slippery slope which allows individuals the ability to control life. And I think that is not the correct answer in our country today because we have no value in life. So when we have incidents in schools, when we have incidents in our education system, we have no value of human life. So I think that life is key, first and foremost.
Thank you very much. I want to thank all of the candidates for taking the time to be here tonight. I am very grateful. I think this is the important thing is what goes on in the primaries to me, and I want to thank the audience for being here and for their attention and their attentiveness. This is what makes democracy work, and seeing everyone here together tonight makes me very proud to be a member of the Southeast Wisconsin contingent. Now we're going to have our closing statements of 1.5 minutes. We're going to proceed in the inverse order, so we're going to go from right to left across the stage. 1.5 minutes for Mr. Pulsey.
All right, thank you again, everybody, for coming out tonight. You know, Wisconsin leads. You've done it since this kind of state became a state. You didn't have a Republican Party, you created one. You didn't have a progressive party, you created one. Yeah, you fought against the fugitive slave law in the 1850s and stood up against the federal government. And that's a beautiful thing. I love this state. I'm proud to be here, and we're going to stay here. We're not going anywhere. So the decision now moving forward is I'm asking for your vote on August 14th. Who is it that's going to be the one that's going to fight? Who is it the one that's going to represent you the best? And you've listened to us up here. You've seen us across the district the last several months. And I believe it's me. I believe I have the best platform. I believe that I have the best vision and the solutions for the different things that are facing us in Congress. And the life experiences that we bring, both as being in a military uniform and then also as a small business owner, a dad and a husband, you carry that with you. You carry those environments, you carry those things with you. And so when it's time to step up, it's time to take action, you need to know that there's going to be a fighter, someone that's not going to roll over, someone that's not going to sign bills, someone that's not going to just go along to get along, someone that's going to fight to represent you here in the 1st District and also across the country. There's an African proverb during my travels that I really like. And it reads, when spider webs unite, they can stop the progress of lions. And this is what this is all about. You send me to the Congress, I'm going to lead, and I'm going to represent this district.
Thank you. Mr. Stile.
Thank you. Born and raised in Wisconsin, I think I hold Wisconsin values. Worked in the private sector. I think Washington needs people with private sector experience. Worked as an appointee of Governor Walker, delivering a conservative message, in particular as it relates to holding the line on tuition and understanding what tough votes takes. I think there's Wisconsin-style solutions that are needed in Washington to advance the conservative agenda. I'd ask you to look back as to where we were 10 years ago, where the unemployment rate was, where the challenges were, and in front of us we had a choice, that the answer resided in Washington, D.C. and in Madison, or the answer resided here in our communities, Kenosha, Janesville, everywhere in between, in our local individuals, in our churches. We chose the latter. And look where we've gotten to. These conservative policies that we fought for over the past years have brought the economic growth that we're seeing today. I've been in the trenches fighting for these conservative causes. I'm now standing up asking for your support. And if given the opportunity, I'm going to continue to fight and continue to work hard to earn the trust and confidence of the voters to ultimately defend this seat come November. Thank you.
Mr. Steen, you get the last word.
Thank you very much. I can't thank you guys enough for coming out and listening to the three of us give our values and our visions for this country. And I think it's important that you make an educated decision on August 14th and you know who will represent you. I think there's a few strengths that you can look at the different campaigns, and especially my own, and you can draw a line between the people standing on this stage. We have run a campaign completely with a volunteer army that gets up every morning so that they can represent you from a district. And they are men and women who go unpaid, and they support the cause that is my candidacy to represent you. And I think that's extremely important to realize that we're running a campaign on less than 5% of the supposed front-runner budget. If you go to Washington, how are you going to run a campaign in Washington with an unlimited budget? That's what's wrong with our country. We need people in this country that can lead with what they have and not take from others. And I think it's critical that we look at our president. The president of the United States is the leader of the Republican Party. And I think we need to send someone to Washington whose values can support that president and can put bills in front of that man that we can sign that can enhance your lives and the rest of the people in this district. I appreciate your time. I hope you come out on August 14th and support Kevin Adam Steen for Congress. Thank you.
Thank you all very much, and good night.